Hello and welcome to this week's edition of the Speaker Spotlight. I have the honor of having one of my board members. I call her the metronome. We were talking about that earlier. She just keeps things moving right on tempo. As the treasurer, I have the honor of having Caroline De Posada Rodriguez with me today. Caroline, hello and welcome to the Speaker Spotlight.
Hi, I'm so excited. I get to talk to you about something other than finances.
But you're so good at talking to me about the money, Caroline. It's so cool.
I don't want to talk about the money.
So I tell you what, before we get off track, let's just jump right in. Hey, we were talking earlier. I've described you as one of the busiest people that I know in the speaking business. And I say that on a couple of different levels. One, you do a lot of writing, you do some things in the community, you do some speaking, but you're very, very family oriented. You're always doing things with your family. And so that's why I described that to you. So talk to you a little bit about how you manage being so busy and so spread.
Well, how do I manage being so busy and so spread? You know, they say that if you want to get something done, give it to a busy person, because it just seems that that busy people tend to get things done. And I think the only way that I can answer that question is I just do the things that I am supposed to do. I'm a person who's very priority oriented. I'm principle oriented. I live by my principles and I live by my priorities. And because I have that training and because I was raised to live by principles and priorities, I tend to focus on what matters most. And maybe that's why I get the things done, the way that I get them done.
Right. Well, you do get them done, and you've got a lot of things going on. I do want to talk a little bit about this. I love the way you write, Caroline. I'm blessed I'm on your email list, and I get a lot of stuff that you write. I feel like you're talking to me when you write. Is writing a product of just the practice of writing all the time? Is it something that came to you naturally? Is it something that you had to work on? How do you write so personally, I think is the way I describe that.
Well, I think that with anything in life, you always have a combination of talent and practice. Writing is something that definitely comes naturally to me. My grandfather, my father's father was a journalist.
Oh.
My grandfather on my mother's side was an attorney, writer. My father was an author. So obviously down the genetic pool, writing is in there somewhere. And writing is definitely something that has always come naturally to me. But just because something comes naturally to you doesn't mean that you are proficient at it. And the way that I have become proficient at writing is I have done the work. I write constantly. One of the best things I've ever done is I've hired good editors. I always say this example. When I was writing my book, I hired Dave Bricker to edit my book. Mm-hmm. And I spent maybe a year hating Dave Bricker. I hated him because I spent—
Join the club.
Right? I spent a year fighting with him on my work. You got to take this out. This doesn't make sense. This is redundant. This is too kitchen table. This is too professional. All these different discussions that we were going back and forth. And I had to, number one, fight for the things that I really believed in. So what that did was it gave me the confidence that I needed in myself to be a writer. I had to step up to say, well, no, this is my voice and this is the writer that I want to be. But it also made me correct a lot of the amateur mistakes that I used to make as a writer.
Right.
Because I had somebody that could see things that I couldn't see. So working with him as an editor really took me to another level in my writing. So, I have a friend of mine who's a runner. And I asked him once, how do you run so fast? He said, well, if you want to run fast, just run more.
Right.
And And the same thing with writing. If you want to write well, well, write more. You know, just keep writing, and not all of it is going to be great,
Right.
but if you're writing consistently and you have somebody that's giving you feedback, that knows what they're doing, that's better at the craft than you are, then you improve.
Awesome. I think there's a larger lesson in that, Caroline, in that, they always say, speakers speak. If you want to speak more, speak more. Writers write. If you want to write more, write more. And the
Absolutely.
lesson for a lot of people who aren't speaking a lot, they aren't producing a lot of content, is that they can't be afraid to A, be a beginner, and B, they can't be afraid to get feedback. Like most people would rather be ruined by praise than saved by criticism.
Oh God, that's such
And
a statement.
and that whole thing about you sending your stuff to Dave, who I know you and Dave are friends, we're all friends, but in a professional sense, Dave was your mirror.
Oh
For
yeah,
you
and
to, for,
he tells me all the time. He says, Caroline, the reason you've become such a good writer is because you have been willing to go through the pain
yes,
of of questioning every word, of accepting the constructive feedback, of confronting the criticism. It's hard to do that, and that goes as a speaker as well. It's hard to deliver a speech, and speakers love the applause, the praise, the standing ovations. It's wonderful to do that, but there's something to be said about improving your craft, and the only way that you can do that is by constantly being willing to get better.
yep, yeah, which means you're constantly willing to take the bumps and bruises that go along with that. I mean,
Yeah,
I think that's really really cool. That's worth the price of this interview anyway.
thank you.
Here's here's what I'd like to talk to you about. Your dad was and still is a giant in our industry, right?
Yes.
You, if my understanding is, if my memory is correct, you were in the, I don't know, do they call it the junior program at NSA? What do they call it?
The youth program.
The youth program at NSA. So you've been around this with a very bright light for a long, long time, right? Tell us a little bit about what that's like. What are some of the similarities, and what are some of the things that you feel that you've had to do to kind of break out of that, both for yourself and for your dad?
uh, you're saying break out of my dad's giantness, my
Yeah.
being behind.
Well, let me rephrase. To move into your own giantness, if that's a word that we just made up. We just made that up, and Dave's going to call us and say you can't do that. That's okay.
Say, yes, we can. And we did. So it's a really good question. And yes, to answer your question, I've been involved in National Speakers Association and Florida Speakers Association since I was 13 years old. So I have probably been in the Florida Speakers Association almost as long as Gail Carson. And considering the fact that I am much her junior, that's a huge accomplishment in my opinion. So yeah, I've been in this world forever. I feel very privileged and blessed to have been in this world, because when I was a young girl, I was exposed to other giants in the industry, not only my father. I'll never forget, I had lunch with Harvey Mackay when I was 15 or 16, and he and I, we bonded, we connected, and he made me promise that I would read his books. And as a result, he sent me all of his books. He sent me in a package. I actually have them all here.
Oh, wow.
Harvey Mackay's books. He sent me a huge box with all of his books, and my only requirement was that I had to read them. And I was only, 15 or 16 at the time.
Right.
So these relationships that I built in this industry have been invaluable. However, because my father was a giant in the industry, that can work to your favor, and it could also work to your detriment. And you and I had talked about it before. For a long time, I always looked at my father as these shoes that I was never going to be able to walk in. I was never going to fill those shoes because he was unique and he was larger than life and he was just his own essence. And over the years, I've had to learn that is not my responsibility to walk in his shoes. It's my responsibility to walk in my own shoes. And therefore, now I take the lessons that I've learned from my father. I take his legacy very seriously. If you've ever read my work or you've ever followed me on social media or you've ever heard my speeches, you know that my father comes with me to everything that I do. He is a very large part of my work, and I always give him his place and his honor that he so deserves. But at the same time, I've also had to develop my own criteria for what I define success as. For example, my father was traveling all over the world. My father was giving speeches and he was on a plane all the time. And I learned at a very early on that wasn't the lifestyle that I wanted to have. Right. I wanted to be a mom. I wanted to be a wife. I didn't want to be away from my kids all the time. I didn't want to be on a plane all the time. And I used to think that because I didn't want to follow his model, I didn't want to do the work.
Right, right.
And it took a long time for me to realize that there was other ways to do the work that were not following his model. So I feel very blessed and lucky that I get to do his work at a time where the possibilities for models are endless. You no longer have to get on a plane to do your work. There's so many different ways to do this work. So because I've had access to resources and tools and personal development and to my father, I have the skill set, I have the training, I have the tools to be able to do the work well. But what I had to find on my own was the confidence to know that I was good enough to do it.
Let me ask you, I'm going to go back to something that you were talking about earlier. How long did it take you to really appreciate those experiences that you were able to have with your father and through your father as a young lady? How long did it take you to really begin to appreciate how important that would be in your development?
James, I'm an old soul, so I'm kind of like an anomaly in the sense that I always appreciated it.
Awesome.
I always knew how important it was. I consider my father to be my soulmate. I valued those relationships from when I was young. When I was living those experiences, I already appreciated the value of the experiences. What took me a long time to realize was the person that they were going to turn me into. I didn't realize who I was going to become at the time. I understood its value. I appreciated it for what it was, but I didn't have the understanding of what my possibilities were. I didn't know what my potential was. I didn't know that I would be doing this work. I always thought I was going to be Caroline De Posada's daughter.
Right.
And I was okay with that. So I used the benefits from those tools to become a lawyer, to graduate from college, to have a successful marriage, I used all those for my personal life. I didn't realize that those things were going to trickle and I was going to myself become a motivator at some point.
Right. One of the things that I talk to people about all the time is that if you are appreciative and if you understand them, your life becomes the sum total of your experiences.
Oh, yes.
And as you've developed, all of those things have helped develop you. I want to switch gears for just a little bit. I want to come back to your family in just a minute. But you've got something exciting going that you smile about when you're talking about. What do you have going on in your career right now? What's something that's really cool going on right now?
So right now, I am uber focused on my core challenges. And I'm not sure if you're familiar with what that is, but during COVID at the beginning, which is going to be a year now, when we went into quarantine, we were all forced to change the way that we did business. our
But
careers.
I'm going to interrupt. By the way, you had me fasting at that first part. Didn't work for me very well, but that's okay.
You never did my fast, James. You're lying. If you had fasted with me, you'd be thanking me right now.
I tried for a couple of days.
That's because you tried on your own. You got to do
I
it in the community.
I know.
So
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
at the beginning, we were no longer speaking. My book tour was canceled. All these things that I expected to do in 2020 did not happen. And what I noticed was that I was home with my family, and I savored that time. I'm very grateful for that time that I had, because I was in the pool with my kids all the time. I was playing board games. My husband and I were exercising in the garage together. It was a beautiful time that I'm very grateful for. I know that COVID has come with a lot of consequences and a lot of grief for a lot of people. So I say that with a lot of humility, that for me, it was a time of family bonding and togetherness, because we were home and I had the privilege of being able to be home with my family. But at some point, what I started to realize was that people were having a very different experience. Women were binge eating, they were binge drinking, they were binge watching TV, they were falling apart, they were feeling alone, unsupported, depression was rising, motivation was decreasing. There was all these things that were happening. And from that experience, to make a very long story short, we started developing these challenges, which were 28-day programs, to get these women to start investing in themselves again and find the community and the accountability and the camaraderie and the empowerment that they needed to make better choices. So that started as a free plank challenge, which was going to be 30 days in March, and has developed into a full platform for women. I mean, we have an app, we have we've had hundreds of women who've gone through the program. We have an incredible community that has formed as a result of it. Our fasting program has been born from those challenges. So now we host fasts quarterly. You're going to have to do the one in April now that you challenged me. We have fasts that are quarterly. We have our challenges that are also quarterly, and we have a year-round membership community for the women to always have that support. And the reason it makes me smile and the reason it gets me excited is because I have found that without leaving my house, virtually on a phone, I, on a daily basis, do my work. Right. I get to inspire, I get to motivate, I get to speak, I get to coach, I get to share with these women and see results and progress and development and mindset shifts. I mean, it is my life work.
Let me tell you what I'm hearing you say. And if I'm anywhere close, I want you to respond to this. There are so many people, not just in the speaking industry, who say, I am this or I am that. And whether it be COVID or other outside factors, they've disrupted what I do. And there are those people who said, here is what I do. This has happened. I'm now going to respond to what happened, and I'm going to move with it. And I hate using the word pivot because it seems that you're avoiding something when you pivot from something. I'd like to think of it as you have evolved with the things that have happened. I'd like for you to respond to that. Am I hearing that a little bit in what you're saying?
I think most certainly. And I like how you I love the word pivot, but I'd never looked at it the way that you just described it, which is pivot could also mean that you're moving away from something. And I didn't move away from speaking or coaching. I moved into it in a way that served my community at the time, that needed it at the time, and in a way that served me as well. So I love that. I love that we can redefine what we actually did. It wasn't, maybe it wasn't a pivot. Maybe it was more of an acceptance or embracing the
An
thing
evolution.
we
Yeah.
have. It was an evolution. Yeah.
Well, I'm an athlete, so when I think of pivot, I think of pivoting away from a defender. But
Right, right,
that's
right.
just my thought pattern. But which is why
And
I don't like it.
a lot of my women in my community are pivoting because
Mhm.
they're pivoting away from bad habits. They're
Right.
pivoting away from a negative mindset. They're pivoting away from being isolated and
Yeah.
now feeling in community. But I didn't necessarily pivot. I went in line and I evolved with my message and my work. I'm doing the same speech that I was giving to corporations a year ago is the formula and the format and the platform and the same principles that I'm teaching to these girls on a daily basis now.
Right.
It's the same
Awesome.
work.
Yeah. That's awesome. I want to get back. I want to get back to your family a little bit because you had. We talked about life experiences. You had the opportunity to experience with Orly an amazing experience. So give us a little snapshot. Tell everybody what that was in brief, and then give us a little snapshot of your time away.
So Orly, my 12-year-old is an actor, and he has been an actor since he was 7 years old. He discovered his craft at a very young age and realized that not only did he have talent for it, but he had passion for it as well. So we have been very supportive in his development as an actor and have catered to all his ideas and what he's wanted to do. And his latest adventure was he came home in February or January of last year and said, I want to be represented by an agency because I want to go to Broadway, and I'm not going to get to Broadway if I don't get represented by an agency. And I'm thinking, this is my 10-year-old talking. I mean, are you kidding me? So he forced me to, he brought me the name of the agency written on his wrist because a friend of his was being represented by this agency at
Right.
school. So he brought me the name of the agency, said, this is where you have to apply for me. And he harassed me until I filled the application and obeyed him because I'm convinced the child is raising himself. And so I obeyed him and I filled out the application. And one of the concerns that the agency had, because they're a New York-based talent agency, the concerns they had was that he lived in Miami. And in his audition tape, he said, hi, my name is Orly Rodriguez and I'm from Miami, Florida, but don't worry about me being from Miami because I have very supportive parents who are willing to travel. And he did that, and he did that in March. He was hired, he signed his agency in March. Actually, he was in New York signing the talent agency contract the day they closed Broadway.
Oh, wow.
So it's about to be
Yeah.
a year. Well, his first job that he got with the talent agency was an acting project in South Korea. And my husband said, Orly, when you said my parents are flexible and willing to travel, we meant Orlando. We did not mean Korea. Okay? But we were on the train. There was nothing we could do about it. Now,
Right.
James, talking about my dad, for the people that don't know this, that are in Florida Speakers Association, my dad was hugely famous in Korea. In fact, he's got books. He sold, I don't know how many millions of copies of his Don't Eat the Marshmallow books in Korea. He was huge, huge, huge in Korea. He's gone to book signings in Korea. I mean, Korea, he's like the Hasselhoff of Korea. What are the odds that his little grandson would get a job in South Korea, unrelated? He doesn't have his last name. They didn't know, well, he has his last name, but he didn't use his last name. They didn't know it was him. And they hired the grandson of this famous author in Korea to do work, to act over there. So because of the coincidence and the serendipitous nature of the whole thing, and because it was my son's dream,
Right.
we made the decision to support him. And my son and I moved to Korea for 2 months And so that he can work over there, he took me along for the ride. And my husband stayed behind with the two little ones holding down the fort here. And that was the experience.
What an awesome experience. You know, those are experiences of a lifetime. And, you know, that could be just the beginning of his growth. And again, we talked about the connections too at your dad, who was such a giant, those connections and being able to build on that. Um, here's what I want to talk about for just a little bit. You have been, as we talked earlier, involved in FSA and NSA almost as long as you can remember from a young lady. Why and how has it been so important for you to remain involved? And what type of, from a business point of view, what type of benefits do you get from remaining involved in FSA and NSA?
Well, the number one thing that it did for me when I was a youth was that it opened my eyes and gave me a perspective and a worldview that would have been impossible for me to gain on my own going to school as a regular school student. I mean, impossible. People don't know this about the youth program, but the youth program, which I'm the chair of this year, by the way.
Okay. Yeah.
So the youth program is really a leadership program. It models National Speakers Association, and the goal of the program is to raise potential and future leaders in whatever industry that they want to be in. Doesn't have to be a speaking profession. I didn't know I was going to become a speaker. I became a lawyer, you know, before, but the youth program gave me resources, perspective, worldview, access to people from to children from other states, from other cultures, from other countries, from other mindsets, from other religions. I mean, the access that I had as a child, you just don't get that.
Right.
Going to your local school, like you just don't get that. So that's from as a child. In terms of my development, I accredit a lot of my success to the relationships and to the knowledge and just to the energy that I received from the youth program. So that's one thing. Right now, in terms of business, what keeps me in the program is what my dad used to always say, which is there's always something to learn. And in Florida Speakers Association, you are always learning. Every time I sit down, whether it's virtually or in person, and I sit before a speaker who gives me an insight to their practices, to their systems, to their models, to their philosophies, I'm richer because of it.
Right.
Period. I get to go home and I get to decide whether I'm going to put those philosophy, systems, and practices in action, whether I'm going to put them on the shelf and remember them for later, whether I'm going to use them. You know, I am richer because I participate and I belong to an organization like this one. And anyone that is in the speaking business and does not benefit from the Florida Speakers Association is throwing resources away. It's like you're throwing money away because you are not utilizing the wisdom of other people. It's 100% guaranteed that a mastermind works better than one mind. Community works better than an individual. That's why in business you need a team. That's why you need people to think bigger than you. That's why you can't solve a problem with the same thinking that got you into the problem. You need to open your mind and open your horizons. And Florida Speakers Association and National Speakers Association offers us the tools to be able to do that at a ridiculous price. It would cost us so much more if we went to those people individually.
And I love it because there are people that always make me think, right? Whether I agree or disagree with the way they do things, they're always making me think. And that's just really kind of the cool part of that. And for someone who's been around it as long as you, I think I was just looking at the pictures yesterday. I think I went through the academy 6 or 7 years ago. Dave Bricker Keith Harmeyer, myself, we went through the academy together. Kingsley Grant, who's no longer part of the chapter, uh, but it has made me, or it has forced me in some ways, to think about how I look at myself as a speaker. Just really quickly, I was having an interaction. I was on the, I think you called it chat with the chairman yesterday with Barry Banther, and I was telling him that I told him, I said, I'd kind of put my speaking on hold because I was in seminary right now, and that, just with the church, I said, I do get to speak, I get to stand and talk in front of 3,000 people every week, but I've put my speaking. But he made me think, because he came back to me and he said, because he has a background in seminary, he knew about the seminary that I go to, and he came right back and he says, no, he said, you haven't put it on hold. He goes, you are exercising just a different portion of the speaking business in a different way, and that will lead to you being able to grow that into other things. So just even small interactions can make you think about how things are done, how you can do them, and to look at yourself in that mirror, which is really, really cool.
Absolutely. And also what that conversation with Barry made you do is it makes you understand that you can leverage what you're
Yes.
already doing
Yes.
for potential speaking engagements, because we tend to put things in buckets and compartmentalize our roles. We're like, well, that doesn't fit in that role, and that doesn't fit in that role. But in reality, we as humans leverage each other. We leverage the roles in
Yes.
everything that we do. A lot of the skills that I learned as a speaker, I have to implement as a parent or as a
Right.
wife. We should be leveraging. There is no, uh, there's a lot of gray area in between these buckets, and we get to be a little bit of ourselves in all of them.
Awesome. Awesome. We could do this like for the next 2 hours, don't you? But, but we can't. And I appreciate your time, but this is the last question. I'm going to ask you, for those people who are, let's say that they're not feeling that they're getting out of NSA or FSA what they want, or for those speakers who are coming up right now, who are thinking about, do I want to be a speaker, and what can I do to get there? We've got academy people. We have a number of aspiring speakers who are trying to break through right now. I'd like your nugget on encouraging them to stay the course and to continue to move toward that dream.
I think that we are all speakers. Whether you are we all use our voice to communicate, and we are in a time right now where that platform can look very differently. But for you, your form of communication and speaking can be in front of your seminary, in front of 3,000 people. For others, what it means is a mastermind of 10. What others it means is a social media platform, or a coaching program. There's all these different ways. Teachers are speakers.
Yes.
What do speakers do? And I've heard I've learned a lot about that in Florida Speakers Association. That's opened my mind to what is a speaker and what is the purpose of a speaker. And if your goal in life is to impact, to serve, to create influence, then speaking needs to be a part of your platform. It needs to be a part of your model, whether it's the number one portion of it, whether that's your primary source of income, or it's something that you do for free that leads you into other business, or it's something that you do for charity fund organization. Regardless of how you implement your speaking skills, you need to be using your voice if you want to impact, influence, and serve.
Awesome. I love that. You need to use your voice if you want to impact, influence, and serve. That's absolutely awesome. Again, Caroline, first of all, thank you for all the work that you do on the board and you've done as a treasurer for the last 2 years. I am eternally appreciative of what you've done and what you continue to do for our chapter. And I just want to thank you for your time today. And it is an honor, really, to work together in this chapter with you. And I truly mean that. So
I feel the
um,
same about you, James. Thank you.
thank
It,
you.
one of the benefits of being in this association is be having friends like you.
Yeah. Oh, it's so awesome. All right. That's it with Caroline De Posada. And we're going to be back next week with another fabulous edition of the Speaker Spotlight. And you need to continue to check us out.